In the early springtime morning, pale sunlight flickered behind the morning mist, floating through the trees as Templar and Stringpool made their way to the clearing. Neither had been back in High Rock, let alone in their favorite woods, for 4 years. The trees had changed little, even if they had. Stringpool had a handsome blonde mustache now, stiffened and spiked with wax, and Templar seemed to be a completely alien creature to the young lad who searched for adventure in the ancient grove. He was much quieter, as if scarred within as well as without. They each carried their bows and quivers with extra care as they maneuvered their way through the clusters of vine and branch.
"Hey, this is the path that used to lead to your house, isn't it, old boy?" asked Stringpool.
Templar glanced at the overgrowth and nodded, before continuing on.
"I thought so," said Stringpool and laughed. "I remember it because you used to run down it every time you got a bloody nose. I know I can't offend you, but I have to say, it's hard to believe you ended up a soldier." "How's your family?" asked Templar. The same. A bit more pompous, if that's possible. It's obvious they wish I'd come back from the academy, but there's nothing for me here. At least not until I collect my inheritance. Did you see I got a gold ribbon of merit in archery? How could I miss it? Said Templar. Oh yes, I nearly forgot that the families put it in the Great Hall. Very ostentatiously. I suppose you can actually see it through the picture window. Silly, but I hope the peasants are impressed.
The clearing opened up before them, where the mist settled on the grass, enveloping it in an opaque, chilly vapor. Burlap targets were arranged around in a semicircle, several meters apart, like sentinels.
You've been practicing, observed Templar. Well, a bit. I've only been back in town for a few days, said Stringpool with a smile. My parents said you got here a week ago? That's right. My unit's camped a few miles east, and I thought I'd visit the old haunts. A lot's changed. I could hardly recognize anything at all. Templar looked down at the valley below, to the vast, empty-tilled ground stretching out for miles around. It looks like a good planting. My family's rather spread out since yours left. There was some discussion, I think, about keeping your old house up, but it seemed a little sentimental, especially as there was fertile ground beneath.
Stringpool strung his bow carefully. It was a beautiful piece of art, darkest ebony and spun silver filigrees, handcrafted for him in Wayrest. He looked over at Templar stringing his bow and felt a twinge of pity. It was a sad, weathered utensil, bound together with strips of fabric. If that's how they taught you to string your bow, you need some advisors from the academy in that army of yours, said Stringpool as gently as he could. The untightened loop is supposed to look like an X and an O. Yours looks like a Z and a Y. It works for me, said Templar. I should tell you, I won't be able to make an afternoon of this. I'm supposed to join my unit this evening. Stringpool began to feel annoyed by his old friend. If he was angry about his family losing their land, why couldn't he just say it? Why did he come back to the valley at all? He watched Templar knock his first arrow, taking aim at a target, and coughed. I'm sorry, but I can't in good faith send you back to the army without a little new wisdom. There are 3 types of draw. 3 fingers, thumb and index, thumb and 2 fingers. Then there's the thumb draw, which I like, but you see, Stringpool showed Templar the small leather loop fastened on the cord of his bow. You need to have one of these thingies or you'll tear your thumb right off.
I think I like my stupid method best. Don't be pig-headed, Templar. They didn't give me the gold ribbon of merit for nothing. I had demonstrated shooting from under a shield, standing, sitting, squatting, kneeling, and sitting on horseback. This is practical information I'm imparting for the sake of our friendship, which I, at least, haven't completely forgotten. Sweet Kinnereth, I remember when you were just an oily little squirt begging for this kind of honest guidance.
Templar looked at Stringpool for a moment and lowered his bow. Show me. Stringpool relaxed and shook away the tensions that had been building. He did his exercise, drawing the bow back to his eyebrow, his mustache, his chest, his earlobe.
There are 3 ways of shooting: snatching and releasing in one continuous motion, like the Bosmer do, holding with a short draw and a pause before releasing, like the Khajiit, and partial draw, pause, final draw. Stringpool fired the arrow into the center of the target with cool precision. And release, which I prefer.
Very nice, said Templar.
Now you,
said Stringpool. He helped Templar select a grip, nock his arrow correctly, and take aim. A smile grew on Templar's face. The first time Stringpool had seen such a childlike expression on the war-etched visage all afternoon. When Templar released the arrow, it rocketed high over the top of the target and into the valley below, where it disappeared from sight. Not bad, said Templar.
No, not bad, said Stringpool, feeling friendly once again. If you practice, you should be able to focus your aim a little bit.
The two shot a few more practice bolts before parting ways. Templar began the long trek east to his unit's camp, and Stringpool wound his way down through the woods to the valley and his family's mansion. He hummed a little tune he learned at the academy as he passed the great lawn and walked up to the front door, pleased with himself for helping his old friend. It entirely escaped his attention that the large picture window was broken. But he noticed right away when he came into the great hall and saw Templar's wild shot bolt sticking in his gold ribbon of merit. Brawla was a little girl, beautiful and sweet-natured, beautiful and smart, beautiful and energetic. Everything that her parents had dreamed she would be. As perfect as she was, they could not help but have dreams for her. Her father, a bit of a social climber named Munthin, thought she would marry well, perhaps become a princess of the Empire. Her mother, an insecure woman named Sinetta, thought she would reach greatness on her own, as a knight or a sorceress. As much as they wanted the very best for their daughter, they argued about what her fate would be, but both were wrong. Instead of growing up, she grew very ill. The temples told them to give up hope, and the Mages Guild told them that what afflicted Brawla was so rare, so deadly, that there was no cure. She was doomed to die, and soon. When the great institutions of the Empire failed them, Munthin and Sinetta sought out the witches, the sorcerer hermits, and the other hidden secret powers that lurk in the shadows of civilization. I can think of only one place you can go, said an old herbalist they found in the most remote peaks of the Rothgarian Mountains. The Mages Guild, at Allenveld. But we have already been to the Mages Guild, protested Munthin. They couldn't help us. Go to Allenveld. the herbalist insisted. "And tell no one that you're going there." It was not easy to find Allenveld, as it did not appear on any modern map. In a bookstore in Skyrim, however, they found it in a historic book of cartography from the Second Era. In the Yellow Pages, there was Allenveld, a city on an island in the northern coast, a day's sail in summertide from Winterhold. Bundling their pale daughter against the chill of the ocean wind, the couple set sail, using the old map as their only guide. For nearly 2 days, they were at sea, circling the same position, wondering if they were the victim of a cruel trick. And then they saw it. In the mist of crashing waves were twin crumbled statues framing the harbor, long-forgotten gods or heroes. The ships within were half-sunk, rotten shells along the docks. Munthin brought his ship in, and the three walked into the deserted island city. Taverns with broken windows, a plaza with a dried-up well, shattered palaces and fire-blackened tenements, barren shops and abandoned stables, all desolate, all still, but for the high keening ocean wind that whistled through the empty places. And gravestones. Every road and alley was lined and crossed again, with memorials to the dead. Munthin and Sinetta looked at one another. The chill they felt had little to do with the wind. They looked at Brawla and continued on their goal, the Mages Guild of Allenveld. Candlelight glistened through the windows of the great, dark building, but it brought them little relief to know that someone was alive in the island of death. They knocked on the door and steeled themselves against whatever horror they might face within. The door was opened by a rather plump, middle-aged Nord woman with frizzy blonde hair. Standing behind her, a meek-looking, bald Nord about her age, a shy teenage Breton couple, still very pimply and awkward, and a very old, apple-cheeked Breton man who grinned with delight at their visitors. "Oh my goodness," said the Nord woman, all afluster. "I thought my ears must be fooling me when I heard that door knocking. Come in, it's so cold." The three were ushered in the door, and they were relieved to find that the guild did not look abandoned in the least. It was well swept, well lit, and cheerfully decorated. The group fell into introductions. The inhabitants of the guild house in Allenveld were two families: the Nords, Hjalmar and Nettie, and the Bretons, Lywell, Rosalind, and Old Winster. They were friendly and accommodating, immediately bringing some mulled wine and bread, while Munthin and Sinetta explained to them what they were doing there, and what the healers and herbalists had said about Brawla. "So, you see," said Sinetta tearfully, "we didn't think we'd find the Mages Guild in Allenveld. But now that we have, please, you're our last hope." The five strangers also had tears in their eyes. Nettie wept particularly noisily. "Oh, you've been through too much," the Nord woman bawled. "Of course we'll help. Your little girl will be right as rain." "It is fair to tell you," said Hjalmar more stoically, though he clearly was also touched by the tale. "This is a guild house, but we are not mages. We took this building because it was abandoned and it serves our purposes since the Exodus. We are necromancers." Necromancers? Sinetta quivered. "How could these nice people be anything so horrible?" "Yes, dear," Nettie smiled, patting her hand. "I know. We have a bad reputation, I'm afraid. Never was very good. And now, that well-meaning but foolish Archmagister Hannibal Trappin—" "May the Worm King eat his soul," cried the old man, quite suddenly and very viciously. Now, Winster, said the teenage girl Rosalind, blushing and smiling at Sinetta apologetically. I'm sorry about him. He usually is very sweet-natured. Well, of course, he's right. Monty Marco will have the last say in the matter, Yalmer said. But right now, it's all very, well, awkward. When Traven officially banned the art, we had to go into hiding. The only other option was to abandon it altogether, and that's just foolish. Though, there are many who have done it. Not many people know about Allenveld anymore, since Tiber Septim used it as his own personal graveyard, said Lywell. Took us a week to find it again, but it's perfect for us. Lots of dead bodies, you know. Lywell, Rosalind admonished him. You're going to scare them. Sorry, Lywell grinned sheepishly. I don't care what you do here, said Munthin sternly. I just want to know what you can do for my daughter. Well, said Yalmer with a shrug, I guess we can make it so she doesn't die and is never sick again. Sinetta gasped. Please, we'll give you everything we have. Nonsense, said Nettie, picking up Vrala in her big, beefy arms. Oh, what a beautiful girl. Would you like to feel better, little sweetheart? Vrala nodded, warily. You stay here, Yalmer said. Rosalind, I'm sure we have something better than bread to offer these nice folks. Nettie started to carry Vrala away, but Sinetta ran after her. Wait, I'm coming too. Oh, I'm sure you would, but it would ruin the spell, dear, Nettie said. Don't worry about a thing. We've done this dozens of times. Munthin put his arms around his wife, and she relented. Rosalind hurried off to the kitchen and brought some roast fowl and more mulled wine for them. They sat in silence and ate. Winster shuddered suddenly. The little girl has died. Oh! Sinetta gasped. What in oblivion do you mean? Munthin cried. Winster, was that really necessary? Lywell scowled at the old man before turning to Munthin and Sinetta. She had to die. Necromancy is not about curing a disease. It's about resurrection, total regeneration, transforming the whole body, not just the parts that aren't working now. Munthin stood up angrily. If those maniacs killed her, they didn't, Rosalind snapped, her shy eyes now showing fire. Your daughter was on her last breath when she came in here. Anyone could see that. I know that this is hard, horrible even, but I won't have you call that sweet couple who are only trying to help you maniacs. Sinetta burst into tears. But she's going to live now, isn't she? Oh yes, Lywell said, smiling broadly. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Sinetta burst into tears. I don't know what we would have done. I know how you feel, said Rosalind, patting Winster's hand fondly. When I thought we were going to lose him, I was willing to do anything, just like you. Sinetta smiled. How old is your father? My son, Rosalind corrected her. He's 6. From the other room came the sound of tiny footsteps. Vrala, go give your parents a big hug, said Yalmer. Munthin and Sinetta turned, and the screaming began. "It is time for you to leave your apprenticeship here," said the great sage to his students Taksim and Bungeldok. "So soon?" cried Bungeldok, for it had been but a few years since the training began. "Are we such poor pupils?" "We have learned much from you, Master." "But have you no more to teach us?" Taksim asked. "You have told us so many tales of great enchanters of the past. Can't we continue to learn until we have reached some level of their power?" "I have one last story for you," smiled the great sage. Many thousands of years ago, long before the Kairodelic dynasty of Raman, and even longer before the Septim dynasty ruled Tamriel, and before there was a mages guild, and when the land called Morrowind was known as Resdain, and the land of Elsewhere was called Enaquina and Palatine, and the only law of the land was the cruel ways of the Elysian doctrines of Maruk. There lived a hermetic enchanter named Dalak who had 2 apprentices, Uthrak and Lorith. Uthrak and Lorith were remarkable students, both equally assiduous in their learning, the pride of their master. Both excelled at the arts of the cauldron, mirror castings, the infusion of spiritus into mundus, and the weaving of air and fire. Dalak was very fond of his boys, and they of him. On a springtide morn, Dalak received a message from another enchanter named Piothel, who lived deep in the forests of the Colovian heartland. "You must remember that in the dark days of the First Era, mages were solitary practitioners, with the only organized consortium being the Sajiks of Ardium. Away from that island, mages seldom saw one another, and even more rarely corresponded. Thus, when Dalek received Piothel's letter, he gave it his great attention. Piothel was greatly aged, and he had found the peace of his isolation threatened by the Elysian reform. He feared for his life, knowing that the fanatical priests and their warriors were close at hand. Dalek brought his students to him. "It will be an arduous and perilous journey to the Colovian estates, one that I would fear partaking even in my youth," Dalek said. "My heart trembles to send you 2 forth to Piothel's cave, but I know that he is a great and benevolent enchanter, and his light must continue to burn in the heart of the continent if we are ever to survive these dark nights." Uthrak and Lorith pled with their teacher not to order them to go to Piothel. It was not the priests and warriors of the Elysian reform they feared, but they knew their master was aged and infirm and could not protect himself if the reform moved further westward. Finally, he relented and allowed that one would stay with him and the other would journey forth to the Colovian estates. He would let them decide which of them would go. The lads debated and discussed, fought and compromised, and at last elected to let fate make their choice. They threw lots, and Lorith came up short. He left early the next morning, miserable and filled with fear. For a month and a day, he tramped through the forests into the midst of the Colovian estates. Through some planning, some skill, and some assistance from sympathetic peasants, he managed to avoid the ever-tightening circle of the Elysian reform by crossing through unclaimed mountain passes and hidden bogs. When at last he found the dark caverns where Dalek had told him to search for Piothel, it was still many hours before he could find the enchanter's lair. No one appeared to be there. Lorith searched through the laboratory of ancient tomes, cauldrons, and crystalline flutes. Herbs kept alive by the glow of mystic circles, strange liquids and gases caught in transparent membranes. At last, he found Piothel, or so he presumed. The desiccated shell on the floor of the study, clutching tools of enchantment, scarcely seemed human. Lorith decided that he could do nothing further for the mage, and began at once the journey back to his true master, Dalak, and his friend, Uthrak. The armies of the Reform had moved quickly since he passed. After more than one close encounter, the young enchanter realized that he was trapped on all sides. The only retreat that was possible was back in the caves of Peothil. The first thing to be done, Lorith saw, was to find a means to keep the army from finding the laboratory. That, he found, was what Peothil himself had been trying to do, but by a simple error even an apprentice enchanter could recognize, he had only succeeded in destroying himself. Lorith was able to take what he had learned from Dalak and apply it to Peothil's enchantments, quite successfully. The laboratory was never found or even detected by the Reform. Much time passed. In the 480th year of the First Era, the great Aiden Darini won many battles against the Elysian Horde, and many passages and routes that had once been closed were now open. Lorith, now no longer young, was able to return to Dalak. When at last he found his way to his master's old hovel, he saw candles of morning lit in all the trees surrounding. Even before he knocked on the door and met his old fellow student, Uthrak, Lorith knew that Dalak had died. "It was only a few months ago," said Uthrak after embracing his friend. "He talked of you every day of every year you were away. Somehow he knew that you had not preceded him to the world beyond. He told me that you would come back." The gray-haired men sat before the fire and reminisced of the old days. The sad truth was that they both discovered how different they had become. Uthrak spoke of carrying on the master's work, while Lorith described his new discoveries. They left one another that day, each shaking his head, destined to never see one another again. In the years ahead, before they left the mortal world to join their great teacher, Dalak, they both achieved their desires. Uthrak went on to become a respected minor enchanter in the service of Clan Darini. Lorith took the skills he had learned on his own and used them to fashion the Balak Thurn, the Staff of Chaos. My boys, the lesson is you have to learn from a teacher to avoid those small but essential errors that claimed the life of such self-taught enchanters as Peothil. And yet, the only way to become truly great is to try all the possibilities on your own. For many years now, I have traveled the length and breadth of Skyrim, writing of my experiences and my adventures. I have seen many wondrous sights and many strange creatures in my travels. But one encounter remains fixed in my memory, though I wish it were not. I had taken up traveling with one of the Khajiit trade caravans that crisscrossed Skyrim, peddling their wares outside the gates of the large cities. We were nearing Windhelm when the storm struck. It was a violent and terrible gale, one of the very worst I have seen in all my long years. The winds howled like all the Daedra of Oblivion, and the driving snow made us blind to the world. Risad called a halt and we staggered from the road, our hands held over our faces to ward off the stinging pellets of ice. We huddled together in the shelter of a copse of pines. There was no hope of raising our tents. The winds would tear them from our hands the moment we unpacked them. They struck at the height of the storm. There were perhaps half a dozen of the creatures. It was difficult to say, as the blowing snow and howling wind overwhelmed our sight and our hearing. They were roughly man-sized, but hunched over and ugly. For garments, they wore only rags and leathers. They were armed with daggers and swords of various kinds, no doubt scavenged from their previous victims. They had no noses to speak of, only long slits for nostrils. Their ears were sharply pointed, suggesting a distant kinship with the elves. With their pallid skin and lifeless black eyes, they seemed like something out of a nightmare. Isha saw them first, but too late to save herself. So loud was her death cry, we heard it over the roaring winds. That cry saved us all. Alerted to the presence of our foes, the Khajiit drew their blades and formed a circle, facing outward. The white fiends were too few to surround us completely, and the Khajiit fended off each attack. After 3 of the snow devils had fallen, the rest fell back and did not come at us again. The storm abated, and we arrived in Windhelm the next morning. I have taken up residence in the Candlehearth Hall, and I find I am quite comfortable behind the towering stone walls of the city. Comfortable, at least until I go to sleep and visions of those awful creatures return to haunt my dreams. One of the few magical arts the Sajiks of Ardium have kept to themselves, away from the common spells and schools of the Mages Guild, is the gift of divination. Despite this, or perhaps because of it, omens and prophecies abound in Tamriel. Some of substance, others of pure folly, and still others so ambiguous as to be unverifiable. There are still other prophecies kept secret, from the prophecies of Draugr and elsewhere, and the Narration in Morrowind, to the Elder Scrolls themselves. The Nord nobility have a tradition of having omens read for their children. In general, these readings are of the obscure variety. One of my acquaintances told me that her parents were told, for example, that their daughter would have her life rescued by a snake, and so gave her the name Serpentkin in a special ceremony. And this young lady, Araya Valcor Serpentkin, was indeed saved by a snake many years later, when an assassin creeping on her stepped on a danceworm viper. Occasionally, omens seemed to be almost purposefully misleading, as if Boethia had crafted them as traps. I recall one particularly. Many years ago, a male child was born into the house of Redoran. It was a very difficult birth, and the mother was delirious and near death by the time it was over. She chanted just as her son came into the world, and she passed from it. Fortune has smiled this day, not frowned. My child will be mighty in mind and in arm. He shall bring hope to House Redoran. Neither spell nor blade shall hurt the man, nor illness nor poison cause any harm. His blood shall never drop on the ground. The boy, named Ondas, was indeed extraordinary. He never was ill and never suffered so much as a scratch all through his childhood. He was also quite intelligent and strong, which, combined with his invulnerability, caused many to call him, after his mother's omen, the Hope of Redoran. Of course, anyone who is called the Hope of Redoran will eventually develop some taint of impertinence, and it wasn't long before he had enemies. His worst enemy was his cousin, Athen, who had borne much abuse at the hands of Ondas. Primary among the grudges was that Athen had been sent to Rihad to complete his education at Ondas' insistence. When Ethan returned from Hammerfell, it was because of the death of his father, who had also been a counselor of the house. Ethan was old enough to take his seat in the council, but Ondas claimed the seat as well, saying that his cousin had been gone too long from Morrowind and didn't understand politics as he did. The majority of the house agreed with Ondas, wanting to see the hope of Redoran rise quickly. Ethan exercised his right to combat his cousin for the seat. No one thought he had any chance of winning, of course, but the battle was scheduled to commence the following morn. Ondas whored and dined and drank with the counselors that night, confident that his place in the house was secured and the hopeful new dawn of House Redoran was rising. Ethan retired to his castle with his friends, Ondas's enemies, and his servants he had brought from Hammerfell. Ethan and his friends were discussing the duel morosely when one of his old teachers, a warrior called Shardy, came into the hall. She had grown quite proud of her student over the years in Hammerfell, proud enough to accompany him across the Empire to his family's lands, and wanted to know why they had so little confidence in his odds in the battle. They explained to her Ondas's uncommon blessings and the nature of his mother's omen. If he can't be harmed by disease, poison, magicka, and his blood can never be spilled, what hope have I of ever besting him? Cried Ethan. Have you remembered nothing I taught you? Replied Shardy. Is there no weapon you can think of that will slay without blood? Are swords and spears and arrows the only items in your arsenal? Ethan quickly realized the weapons Shardy was speaking of, but it seemed absurd. Not only absurd, but pathetic and primitive. Still, it was the only hope he had. All that night, Shardy trained him in the art and techniques, showing him the various swings and stances her people had developed in Albion Gora, counterattacks, feints, and blocks imported from Yukuda, the classic one- and two-handed grips for the most ancient weapon in history. The cousins faced one another the next morning, and never have two combatants looked so unevenly matched. Ondas's entrance brought a great cheer, for not only was he much beloved as the hope of Redoran, but as his victory was a foregone conclusion, most wanted to be in good standing with him. His shining mail and blade drew admiration and awe. By contrast, Ethan drew a gasp of surprise and only a smattering of polite applause. He appeared costumed and armed like a barbarian. As Shardy had suggested, Ethan allowed Ondas to attack first. The hope of the Redoran was eager to finish the battle and take the power he deserved quickly. The blade, pushed by Ondas's mighty arm, slashed across Ethan's chest, but shallowly, and before it could be counterswung, Ethan knocked it back with his own weapon. When Ethan attacked and wounded Ondas, the hope of Redoran was so surprised by being hurt for the first time in his life, he dropped his sword. The less said about the end of the battle, the better. Suffice it to say that Ethan, wielding a simple club, battered Ondas to death without spilling a drop of blood. Ethan took his father's seat as counselor, and it was then said that the hope and the omen referred to Ethan, not Ondas. After all, had Ondas not tried to take the counselor's seat away from his cousin, Ethan, being not very ambitious, might have never tried to get it. It can certainly be argued that way, I suppose. I think the greatest warrior who ever lived had to be Vilis Nominis, offered Xiomara. Name one other warrior who conquered more territory.
Tiber Septim, obviously, said Hallgerd. He wasn't a warrior. He was an administrator. A politician, said Geraz. And besides, acreage conquered can't be final means of determining the best warrior. How about skill with a blade? There are other weapons than blades, objected Xiomara. Why not skill with an axe or a bow? Who was the greatest master of all weaponry? I can't think of one greatest master of all weaponry, said Hallgerd. Balaxis of Aegionero in Blackmarsh was the greatest wielder of a lance. Ernslaervu of the Ashlands is the greatest master of the club I've ever seen. And the greatest master of the katana is probably an Akaveri warlord we've never heard of. As far as archery goes, Hellenal Whitestrake supposedly conquered all of Tamriel by himself, interrupted Xiomara. That was before the First Era, said Geraz. It's probably mostly myth, but there are all sorts of great warriors of the modern eras. The Camoran usurper, the unknown hero who brought together the Staff of Chaos and defeated Draugr Tharn. We can't declare an unknown champion as the greatest warrior. What about Nandor Barade, the Empress Kataria's champion? Suggested Xiomara. They said he could use any weapon ever invented. But what happened to him? Smiled Geraz. He was drowned in the Sea of Ghosts because he couldn't get his armor off. Call me overly particular, but I think the greatest warrior in the world should know how to take armor off. It's kinda hard to judge ability to wear armor as a skill, said Xiomara. Either you have basic functionality in a suit of armor, or you don't. That's not true, said Hallgerd. There are masters in that as well. People who can do things while wearing armor better than we can out of armor. Haven't you ever heard of Halalu Passaroth, the king's great-grandfather? Xiomara and Geraz admitted that they had not. This was hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Passaroth was the ruler of a great estate, which he had won by right of being the greatest warrior in the land. It's been said, and truly, that much of the house's current power is based on Passaroth's earnings as a warrior. Every week he held games at his castle, pitting his skill against the champions of the neighboring estates. And every week he won something. His great skill wasn't in the use of weaponry, though he was decent enough with an axe and a longsword, but in his ability to move quickly and with great agility, wearing a full suit of heavy mail. There were some who said that he moved faster while wearing armor than he did out of it. Some months before the story begins, he had won the daughter of one of his neighbors, a beautiful creature named Minna, who he had made his wife. He loved her very much, but he was intensely jealous, and with good reason. She wasn't very pleased with his husbandly skills, and the only reason Minna never strayed was because Passaroth kept a close eye on her. She was, to put it kindly, naturally amorous and resentful of her position as a prize. Wherever he went, he always brought her with him. At the games, she was placed in a special box so that he could see her even while he competed. But his real competition, though he didn't know it, was from a handsome young armorer he had also won at one of his competitions. Minna had noticed him, and the armorer, whose name was Terran, had certainly noticed her. This has all the makings of a dirty joke, Hallgerd, said Xiomara with a smile. I swear that it's entirely true, said Hallgerd. The problem facing the lovers was, of course, that they could never be alone. Perhaps because of this, it became a burning obsession to both of them. Terran decided that the best time for them to consummate their love was during the games. Minna feigned illness, so she didn't have to stay in the box, but Passaroth visited the sick room every few minutes between fights, so Terran and Minna could never get together. The sound of Passaroth's armor clunking up the stairs to visit his sick wife gave Terran the idea. He crafted his lord a new suit of armor, strong and bright and beautifully decorated. For his purposes, Terran rubbed the leg joints with Luca dust, so the more he sweated and the more he moved them, the more they'd stick together. After a while, Taryn figured, Passeroth wouldn't be able to walk very quickly and wouldn't have enough time between fights to visit his wife. But just in case, Taryn also added bells to the legs, which rung loudly when they moved, so the couple would be able to hear him coming in plenty of time. When the games commenced the following week, Menna feigned illness again, and Taryn presented his lord with the new armor. Passeroth was delighted with it, as Taryn hoped he would be, and donned it for his first fight. Taryn then stole upstairs to Menna's bedchamber. All was silent outside as the two began to make love. Suddenly, Menna noticed a peculiar expression on Taryn's face, and before she had a chance to ask him about it, his head fell off at the neck. Passeroth was standing behind him, with his axe in hand. How did he get upstairs so quickly with his leg joints gummed up? And didn't they hear the bells ringing? Asked Garaz. Well, you see, when Passeroth realized he couldn't walk on his legs very quickly, he walked on his hands.
I don't believe it,
laughed Xiomara. What happened next? Asked Garaz. Did Passeroth kill Menna also? No one knows exactly what happened next, said Hallgerd. Passeroth didn't return for the next game, nor for the next. Finally, at the fourth game, he returned to fight, and Menna appeared in the box to watch. She didn't appear to be sick anymore. In fact, she was smiling and had a light flush to her face.
They did it?
Cried Xiomara. I don't have all the salacious details, except that after the battle, it took 10 squires 13 hours to get Passeroth's armor off because of all the Luca dust mixed with sweat.
I don't understand. You mean he didn't take his armor off when they... But how?
Like I said, replied Hallgerd, this is a story about someone who is more agile and accomplished in his armor than out of it. Now that's a skill, said Garaz.